Um, today the focus topic is personally identifying information, or generally looking deeper into the topic of sensitive information. What makes information sensitive? What kind of information is obviously sensitive? We won't spend a lot of time on that, but and then how information can be sensitive for less obvious reasons or in combination with other information, and that's the more important type of thing to be aware of. This gets into the notion of the practice of trying to anonymize information to make it less sensitive, and the risk of some of the risks of not quite successfully anonymizing information in a way that allows it to be de-anonymized. And then we'll also take a look at how we could deal with sensitive information in practice, and what certain laws, legal frameworks around the world handle sensitive information and requirements around sensitive information. Okay. So the U.S. So there's many definitions of personally identifiable information, or PII. This tends to be a common legal term. It's important, generally a good idea to be aware that at least that this is a important term from a legal perspective that a lot of companies deal with. I'm not a lawyer. I assume most of you aren't either. But and there's various particular definitions. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology has one particular definition, focusing on information that can be able to distinguish or trace an individual identity, or not just that, but also information linked or linkable to an individual, such as medical, educational, financial, or employment information. So it's obviously broader than just your name and address and phone number, but also information around that can potentially be linked to you. So be aware of that in general. What is sensitive data? Well, it can, in principle, be practically anything. These are just some of the many examples. Data about your private life, medical data that can influence your job, or whether you get insurance, or what you pay for insurance. Financial data, such as credit card numbers, that could somebody with if somebody gets a hold of, can use to steal money. Things that could put people in danger, such as allergy information, or in parts of the world, information that could make someone subject to drone attacks. Medical information about medical implants that could actually be, in principle, be targeted for attack. So, and there's, of course, we've been looking at a lot of instances of already in looking at attacks in general, about attacks that have breached sensitive personal information. One of the more interesting examples recently was a massive breach of a particular dating website that I understand some hackers didn't like the philosophy, let's say, of this particular dating website, and I understand this hack was kind of an instance of cyber activism against the morals that, let's say, that this website represented. And so, without taking any particular position on particular dating websites, of course, this successful hack had quite a big impact. The Ashley Madison, compromising 37 million member account files that basically got dumped, everything that Ashley Madison knew anyway about these members, and the hackers basically gave the Avid Life Media, the owners of this site, an ultimatum to shut down its site, but then released about 30 gigabytes of information, and the hackers claimed to have 300 gigabytes total. I can't remember the exact details of how this sorted out in the end, but at any rate, you know, a big deal affecting lots of people. And of course, there have been a lot of there have been plenty of bigger hacks, but this kind of, you know, especially this is one of the many examples that illustrates the types of databases that probably many people would consider quite personally sensitive, right? Now, you know, of course, there's many different definitions and levels of sensitivity. Some kind of information might be sensitive in some contexts, but not so sensitive in others. But often, you know, information that in many cases we think of as not too sensitive can get sensitive in certain contexts, such as through co-location. If it's known to be location specific, and that can be related to someone else in a way that makes that connection sensitive. It might be pseudonymous, but in such a way that allows a person to be de-anonymized in a sensitive way. And so let's just look at a few particular examples of this kind of thing. So let's say so there's been many location-based tech services, right? You know, sign up for this app, and it'll track your position, you know, on the app, and only do really good things that you want it to with your location information, such as put you in contact with with someone, or, you know, make you aware of you know, restaurants and other services in your neighborhood, you know, things like that. But it's often been observed, and you know, many people might not care too much most of the time about their location, but often this kind of data is fairly, if it's released at all or if it's made available at all, it might be at fairly coarse granularity. Like, you know, one person's area is only disclosed to within this fairly large radius or something like that. But there's often ecosystem effects when it comes to privacy. For example, if one person's location is disclosed in some way with in a certain radius, and then another person's location is disclosed, you know, around another radius, but overlapping, and then it's made known that the two people met at at around that time, and this is often natural in social networking apps. You know, I met with someone, or, you know, apps even like to try to get you to check in and encourage you to disclose that you were at a particular location with or you were with someone else. Right? And so often, even if you didn't disclose your location explicitly, multiple pieces of location information can be basically intersected to narrow down, well, where exactly did that meeting take place, right? And often that's not very sensitive, but it can be sensitive in unexpected times, often after sometimes after the fact. And, you know, police rely on this all the time in investigations, being able to, get some approximate information on a potential suspect from one source, some other approximate information from someone else, and, intersect them to find, to narrow things down. So very general risk that privacy erodes quickly when multiple sources of information are available, including and especially location privacy. And in what kind of ways might these location this location information might be sensitive? Well, many people go to groups, attend meetings or church events or things that they might not, where your location might effectively give away information about types of groups you attend or types of things you participate, types of events you participate in. So in not too long ago, what year? I can't remember. A year or two ago in Ukraine, there was a big protest, and at some point, a lot of the people that were physically present at this location, in Kiev, was it? Received a mysterious, rather creepy text message on their cell phones that basically said, presumably not in English, but something to the effect of, "Dear subscriber, you are registered as a participant in a mass riot." And, as far as I know, just that, but we've got your number, we know who you are and where you were at that point, right? And so this can be even if when you think you have strength in numbers, when you can nevertheless be tracked individually in this way and kind of tagged individually using electronic means, that can be creepy at minimum and potentially dangerous, depending on the context. Another example. This is just a hypothetical example in this case, but it's the kind of case that this kind of thing happens all the time, actually, where an anonymous user posts some information anonymously using Tor, using some other hard to track, hard to trace information forum. In this case, let's assume some anonymous user leaks a document under the pseudonym like Mendax, right? But then the authorities or someone or hacker activists or who knows who notices, well, in this case maybe Skype or anyone who can subpoena Skype or get Skype to furnish information can observe that, well, at about the time that anonymous leak was reported, it looked like someone anonymous named Mendax created a Skype account and paid for that account with a credit card under the name, Julian Assange, or pick your, the name of any, pick your figure who might do such a thing. And so, this kind of thing, this kind of practice is used often is a basic investigation technique, and it can, it's obvious, it's not just used by law enforcement, but also, private investigators and for espionage and things like that. So, of course, fortunately, quite a few web browsers and the companies are. Tech companies, including web browser companies, are hearing some of the concern about privacy and building somewhat better privacy features into their software, such as incognito mode and various things like that, ad blockers that try to suppress some of the worst of the cookie-based ad tracking and things like that. But in general, these are very limited in what they can do. Usually there's ways that advertisers still manage to track users and there's many different ways that advertisers and others use to try to get around these kinds of blocking things. Things like detecting and analyzing clicking pattern, kind of because the JavaScript in the Windows can actually see your mouse events, how you move the mouse, how you click if you're clicking in the window. They can examine and categorize and basically fingerprint browser extensions and versions. Another approach that's not listed here, but got some news, was that many browsers and systems can be fingerprinted fairly uniquely just by what set of fonts you have installed. And JavaScript running on a web browser can typically see the set of fonts, even if it can't just categorize it directly, but it can just render something with different font names and test whether you have a particular fonts installed, and fingerprint your system that way. So kind of interesting, one of many interesting subtle ways that browsers can be fingerprinted and potentially tracked by JavaScript code that you get from any arbitrary website, and is untrusted, is supposedly sandboxed, but it's even though it even if it's successfully sandboxed so it can't escape and take over your system, hopefully there's still many of these side channel leaks that can render a system traceable and fingerprintable even even then. So let's now so continuing on the topic of defenses of so these browser functions provide some worthwhile but weak defenses against being de-anonymized and tracked. There's also many companies would like to be able to release user data sets, and data sets are actually very useful to researchers like us academics for research purposes. And Netflix back in 2007 very generously released a big data set of user behavior, anonymized user watching behavior data set. Basically, anonymous user X watched and liked these movies, rated this movie high, rated that movie low, things like that. And user Y watched these other movies in this order and stuff like that, right? So, and all the names, of course, were replaced with random numbers. So it was supposed to be anonymized, supposed to be, and it was just what people had watched, just what random anonymous people had watched, and at least up until this time, this was fairly common practice because it's actually really useful to the company like Netflix. They get good information. They were trying to get researchers to try to come up with better recommendation algorithms, use your machine learning skills to come up with a better recommendation system for Netflix. So it was good for them. Data is always good for researchers, but it wasn't really anonymous or didn't stay anonymized. And so let's look at why that is for a minute. So here's basically the big picture of what Netflix did to the data. So they had internally this database saying, user foo watched The Wall at this particular date and rated it that, and different users watched different movies and rated them in different ways. So Netflix basically took that and replaced the usernames with random numbers. So yeah, so they basically just supposedly scrubbed the private information while still making it while consistently replacing each name with the same random number, so that when one user watch several movies, anyone analyzing the data set could tell, well, this is the same user watching these 5 movies and not just somebody saw this movie at these times. Well, of course, Netflix could have, deleted the user column entirely or replaced them all with fresh random numbers without repeating it for the same user. Why didn't they do that? Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't, yeah, you would, exactly. You wouldn't learn much. Researchers wouldn't learn much if, if they just saw somebody watch this movie and somebody watch this other movie next, so if they couldn't link, any, individual user's action related to particular movies, it would seriously decrease the utility of the data set. So, the kind of completely eliminating the column wasn't really an option for the utility purpose they were seeking, right? And so that, that's why they did it that way. So, but then, what do you suppose happened? What do you guess or know was the problem with it? IMDb, yeah. So this is the problem is Netflix is not the sole authority on the internet on movies and what movies people like, and it turns out that that many people. Oh yeah, and so actually they even randomized the movie names as well, but that wasn't enough because there was the IMDb there too, and it turns out a lot of people who like movies turn out to have both Netflix accounts and IMDb accounts, and some of them even when they like a movie on Netflix, well, they like the same movie on IMDb because they like the movie, right? And if they dislike the movie on Netflix, they dislike the movie on IMDb because they dislike the movie, right? And, in IMDb, this information is totally public. IMDb, and IMDb lists the movies and at least the IMDb usernames, right? Now, and so, the basic idea is, well, for a lot of these users, you can correlate. You can figure out, well, kind of this particular person, likes these particular movies, dislikes these other movies, and you build up enough correlation across enough of those data points, you get pretty certain that, well, this is probably the same user. It's not absolutely certain, but in some cases, you get enough of those points, you get pretty much full certainty. Now, why is this a problem, though? Because, IMDb is totally public information. Apparently, these people who were revealing this information on IMDb were perfectly happy with their names being displayed on the website as liking, liking The Wall and Big Bang Theory in Brazil, right? So what's the problem here? It's public anyway. Yeah?
We also had some extra information in the Netflix one, so if you correlate, you can...
Yeah, exactly. So here's the problem. So in either of the databases, there can be additional information that wasn't present in the other, right? So perhaps the even the IMDb database only revealed these 3 movies that user foo watched and liked, but the Netflix database reveals a 4th movie that the user might be embarrassed about it being publicly known they liked. And believe me, there are plenty more embarrassing movies to like than Knight Rider. But so that's so maybe these other movies that they watched on Netflix, they didn't mention liking on IMDb for good reason, because I don't want people to know that I like those movies, right? But with the correlation of the two, suddenly all of that information is right out there, right? So, yeah, so this was the demonstration. It was some researchers at UT Austin at the time, who are now at Cornell and Princeton, respectively. Some colleagues I know well, Vitaly Shmatikov and Arvind Narayanan, published a very were responsible to figure out how easy it was to de-anonymize these kinds of data sets by combining public information with private information, and they wrote a paper about this, and that really caught a lot of attention in terms of making people aware at how easy it is to for supposedly anonymized data to accidentally reveal potentially sensitive information. Now, as far as I know, nobody, nobody's, got harmed or lost their job or anything by being de-anonymized by Netflix. But it was kind of a big wake-up call as to what can happen accidentally in this case. So it's important, and there were, both they and other researchers have done a lot of follow-up work exploring other potential, other types of data sets that can be de-anonymized using correlation like this. For example, social networking data sets. If there was a period when social networking sites like Twitter and Facebook would release anonymized social networks, graph data with random numbers in place of the usernames, but here are the friend relationships between these random numbers. Well, and of course these researchers showed that, well, that can be correlated with known names in other social network references online to basically re-identify missing nodes in parts of the graph that correlate across these data sets, right? Yeah, so that's, I won't get deeply into that, but it's a very important issue to be aware of, the dangers of kind of naive de-anonymization. Yeah. Okay, so that's that's a perspective on some of the ways that supposedly non-sensitive information can become more sensitive. And in other cases, kind of besides the addition of information, just a change in situation can change previously non-sensitive information to sensitive, right? So under the Obama administration in the US, a lot of climate change researchers were, operating totally in the open. It's a totally legitimate area of science. Why would the fact that you attended a climate change conference be sensitive? Well, and it wasn't in the Obama administration. That changed overnight when Trump came into power. And suddenly, not too long after, the Trump administration started asking U.S. federally funded researchers trying to gather information about what U.S. federally funded information people had visited climate conferences. Right? I'm not sure whether they ever succeeded in getting into this information. It caused, just the fact of asking, fortunately, caused quite a scandal, and they got quite a bit of pushback. But that's just when the politics changes, that can suddenly change the sensitivity of information that's might be quite long in the past. Probably quite a few of these researchers maybe no longer worked for the federal government or no longer were involved in climate change research, but they went to one climate change conference back in the Obama era, and maybe they wouldn't now, but the fact that they did used to be insensitive and now is, right? And so of course that back to that incident I mentioned where the protesters in Ukraine received the creepy text messages. Well, presumably, as far as I know, nothing in particular happened to them at that point, other than getting a creepy text message. But later they could have, if they were caught in other sensitive situations, that could that allowed someone to intersect these multiple data sets, that can quickly narrow the wrong person's interest on say someone who has been to several of these protests, and that's known to the wrong person, something like that. Yeah. Okay, so like I've said before, there's many different types of parties that like to get information, including sensitive information. In many cases, it has, and part of the problem with protecting it is that sensitive information has a lot of monetary value. It has a lot of value to big data companies like Google, especially ad-focused companies, and that's a huge number of tech companies that basically try to monetize user data by selling more targeted ads. By selling to customers, to ad buyers, the promise that we know everything about there is to know about these users, and if you give the criteria of who you want to see the ads, we can target it to exactly your particular segment of the population of interest, right? And the more personal information they have about everyone, the better they at least claim to be able to do that. Now, there's probably more, more potentially legitimate purposes, such as in the medical world. So knowing more about particular people, and a particular person, your genomics, your what kind of medical issues you've had before, all kinds of things can literally, in very important real ways, enable better faster, better medical diagnosis and treatment. And so this is, there is a real potential health benefit to actually disclosing information about your medical history, at least to the right people, to people who might be able to help, right? And so, there actually is a very good reason, there are very good reasons in some of these cases for collecting and using that in some ways, but at the same time it can be super sensitive. So it's a huge trade-off. And of course, governments, some governments, legitimately want to provide better services, and sometimes it helps to be able to know more about what the citizens want. So yeah, so there are many legitimate and semi-legitimate, at least understandable, and certainly apparently legal motivations for gathering and using sensitive data. Of course, we've been talking about some of the illegal and certainly immoral, unethical uses for sensitive data as well. Let's take a look at a couple of those. So one of the we talked about password cracking, right? And one of the problem, one of the reasons that that passwords are so problematic is that a lot of people tend to use the same password across multiple accounts. And so if a user's password gets successfully cracked on one account, or one provider is storing the password in the clear without even hashing, or they're storing it with a simple unsalted hash, and it's easy to look up in a dictionary or brute force attack. Well, an attacker who gets that database suddenly gets a dictionary entry for that user that they can go try with the corresponding email address or other login information on a variety of other online services. And so, and this is a very common technique when hackers are, have a person's information and they're trying to figure out, okay, for this, if I want to target this individual, I only have one account, one username password combination. Can I move laterally across the internet to find and break into other accounts that user holds? But a repeated password is only one of the many ways that can be done, right? So that's the obvious way. If you repeat, the use of your password across those many accounts, of course the attacker just tries that password and is instantly in. But what if you don't do that? And as far as I recall, in this particular incident, a journalist got really, really badly hacked. And because he was a journalist, fortunately, he wrote about it. A nice article recounting his experience. And what happened there, if my memory serves me correctly, is a hacker basically broke into one of his accounts that was weak for some reason, but then used the information available from that was considered non-sensitive on one account as sensitive information on another account. So, for example, some systems consider the last 4 digits of the credit card number you registered the account with to be non-sensitive, meaning they furnish that. They say, okay, please, to confirm that you're you, to reset your password or verify that you're you, please re-enter this credit card number, this full 16-digit credit card number ending in these 4 numbers. Just as a helpful hint to you, the credit card number I'm looking for ends in these 4 numbers, right? So, and you've probably seen that practice here and there. Enter the credit card number ending in these 4 digits, kind of the last 4 digits of an identifier. But then it turned out that another site was actually using the last 4 digits as the authentication factor, as the secret, right? So what did the hacker have to do to break this journalist's account? They just had to, I can't remember which is which, but they went to Apple. They unsuccessfully asked for a password reset, but Apple gave them the last 4 digits of the credit card number. So they took those last 4 digits, went to Amazon, used those to successfully get a password reset, right? And take over the user's account. And then I think they managed to go back and use the information they got from Amazon to get the Apple account. Something to that effect. Basically, the more information a hacker can glean from one account, they can reuse, they break into one account, they get a bunch of account information that you entered into that account, and then they can use that personal information to break into other accounts, right? So, even if you're using strong passwords, it's very common practice for these password reset mechanisms, these I lost my password mechanisms, to rely on random personal information because nobody's coordinated, other sites might just disclose that as hints or things like that, right? So another example of where the inconsistency of what's considered personal, sensitive and less sensitive information actually makes it all even more sensitive. Yeah. So, of course, this, there's many profit-motivated attackers out there, an increasing problem of hackers that are well-funded and financially motivated, trying to gather personal information, mainly in order to be able to do things like infect you with malware or take over systems in order to spread malware and ransomware further to get further leverage. So. Yeah, I'll skip that for now. So in one of the, I mentioned this incident before I believe in the first or second lecture, that really, but I'll come back to it again because I think it really underscores some of the ways that personal information can be so valuable, can have extreme value to potential hackers and attackers of all kinds. So there was this breach of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management in which 21 million records were stolen by someone believed to be, by hackers believed to be associated with China. I'm not sure if that was ever confirmed, but this was a particularly sensitive data set because it was the data set of the SF-86 form. This is a particular U.S. form that I hear is 120 pages long that you have to fill out in the U.S. if you want to get a security clearance. So this is the thing that Jared Kushner has been trying to. The process that Jared Kushner has been trying to go through and still, can't seem to get. And basically, you have to declare anything remotely, fishy or that anybody might consider suspicious, or if you ever joined a communist rally or something like that, and because the U.S. still has a little bit of red fever in its procedures, even though the Soviet Union is long gone per se, and all kinds of other things. If you've ever done X, Y, or Z, you've got to put it on this SF-86 form, right? So a ton of 21 million people who have gotten security clearances over a period of years, maybe it was decades. So there's a huge accumulated database of those kinds of records, and everything potentially sensitive that any of them had declared doing for the purpose of getting a security clearance is now in the hands of presumably a foreign state that now has the perfect data set to be able to, say, blackmail users, or when they come across the border, hello, Mr. Smith, how is that operation healing up, or how is that pacemaker, that electronically aware pacemaker you're wearing do? I'd hate to have anything happen to it during your visit. So it'd be good, right? So I don't know, and as far as I know, we don't know what this data was used for, but it's. I'm sure that's. I'm sure any information the U.S. has acquired on its use more recently has been very closely guarded, but this this is the kind of extremely sensitive personal data that can potentially get a lot of people in a lot of trouble, or make people, vulnerable as tools, as pawns in larger games of espionage or military or cyber attacks. So, okay. Okay, so let's let's take a quick break now until 5:15. We'll be back shortly. Okay.